Thanks very much indeed, Dermot. On the description I'm seeing down there is a former WAG minister. By the way, that's Welsh Assembly Government. It's not wives and girlfriends, for any of you who might not understand the acronym. As Dermot very kindly said, procurement was very close to my heart when I was a Welsh Government minister for over 10.5 years and was responsible for procurement. But it always struck me that whenever you mention public procurement, people's eyes tended to glaze over. And it reminded me of a very famous piece of history, European history, called the Schleswig-Holstein question. And a very complicated issue in the mid-19th century. And it was said there were only 3 people who had ever understood the issue. One had died, the other had gone mad, and the third person had forgotten all about what it was all about in the first place. So, as you can see, I'm very much alive. I hope I haven't gone mad, and I hope I can remember the issues. Why is procurement anywhere important, but particularly in Wales? Well, first of all, it is actually very, very big business. Something like £4.5 billion are spent every year by the public sector in Wales buying a range of goods and services. Now, if you put that into perspective, if you add up the total annual wealth, economic growth, it's called GDP or GVA, gross value added in Wales, it's about between 45 billion and 50 billion pounds a year. So 10% of Wales's national wealth is contributed by public procurement. So it's a lot of money, and it's everything from buying pencils and paper, through to buying computers, IT equipment, through to major construction projects. Consultancy services. I expect many of you in the room who are from the private sector or represent private sector organisations will be aware of either your own business or those of your colleagues where the public sector is the biggest player in the local economy. Here in Swansea, for example, 40% of the workforce work in the public sector. So it's a very, very significant figure. We calculated when we were in government that something like, if we could get an additional 1% of that 4.5 billion won by Wales-based companies, and you can't really say a Welsh company because obviously as many international companies have a representation here. But if you just look on the postcode of companies, we based the calculation that 1% extra would create 2,000 additional jobs. So clearly, again, it's going to have a big impact on the economy. Now in government, working with local government, the health service and others, we actually managed to increase the proportion of business that we won from for Wales-based companies from nearly 1/3 to nearly 1/2. But clearly we know that there's even bigger opportunities. But when I was a minister, and I should first of all welcome you to, it's not my constituency anymore because I'm no longer an Assembly member, but I can't think, if we're talking about winning in tendering, I can't think of a better venue, of course, than the home of the Swans, who famously got promotion to the Premiership in the playoffs against Reading. So we're all very excited here in Swansea, and hopefully we can win in tendering as well as on the soccer field. But we know, and I know, talking to companies large and small across Wales, that there are many barriers to procurement. And when I was a minister and heading up the Business Procurement Task Force, we commissioned some work, some research, in which, in fact, Dermot was involved at Bangor University and also with Trinity College, Carmarthen, together with University of Glamorgan, to look at what are the barriers to procurement from the point of view of small companies. And there were lots of issues. It was a very complex situation. Small companies, over and over again, were having to complete separate pre-qualification questionnaires. So every time they bid for business from what Swansea Council or Neath Platawba Council or Carmarthenshire Council in this area, they would have to fill in a complete new PQQ. There was a lack of transparency and feedback in terms of their bids. You know, they put a lot of time and money into making a bid for a contract and not getting any feedback. Sometimes, you know, the business by which it was assessed The assessment criteria were obviously very complicated and time-consuming for small companies, and in many of them they just thought, well, it's not worth the hassle, we won't bother. And of course, in a lot of areas, a lot of local authorities have got what are called approved lists of contractors or suppliers which they can draw down. Now, obviously, it's great if you're on the approved list, but if you're a company that's not on the approved list, it's no help to you. And there was often these approved lists were set up and then just ran for years and years and years and were never changed or updated. So they were basically anti-competitive. Increasingly, a lot of local bodies, councils and others, public bodies, say, well, look, how can we save money? Well, instead of having lots of different contracts, let's pool them together, let's aggregate them into contracts or framework agreements. And again, often many small companies felt locked out of the process. So the report that Dermot and his colleagues came up with were very important. For example, they said, and I'll just summarize, there were 16 recommendations. For those of you who are interested in this area, you can find the reports on the Assembly Government, or the Welsh Government, as it's now known, on their website. Basically, to try and simplify the process, strip out any unnecessary detail, so small companies in particular can make it much more easier to access public contracts. So a standard PQQ be produced, which is very easy to understand based on plain language, English, or appropriately in Welsh. And that was the recommendation. Also, there should be greater transparency. All contracts over 25k should be advertised on the Sell to Wales website. Guidance should be produced for suppliers, making it, again, easier to understand the process. Approved lists should be banned because they're anti-competitive. They might be easier for a public body to run, but they're not actually very good for the economy because they're anti-competitive. And those companies that can't access or get on them are losing out. And also making sure in terms of understanding that small companies are aware of the system. Training and education is an important part. We calculated, and I'm not sure if the figures have changed, but we calculated that a few years ago, there were only 115 people working in the public sector in Wales that had qualifications in public procurement. So many people actually undertaking procurement at a local authority or a health service or in Welsh Government didn't actually have any training or didn't have any qualifications. So again, it's important that procurement staff be properly trained and have the right qualifications. And also, in terms of how procurement performance is assessed, moving away from a system based on just cash savings to one where the indicator would be more about how can you help the local economy, how can you help local businesses. So in the last Assembly elections, which were only just over 2 months ago now, or when Carwyn Jones established a new government, Welsh Government, in the manifesto for the Labour Party, which I actually wrote, there was a very clear commitment to implement the recommendations of the barriers to procurement opportunities. No ifs, no buts. The government policy is in the next 5 years of the current fourth term of the Assembly, Welsh Government will be implementing the barriers to procurement report. But more than just that, procurement should be used very imaginatively to create opportunities for job and wealth creation, and in terms of community regeneration. For example, another Welsh Government policy, the Can Do Toolkit, many of you may be aware of that, but it's certainly worth looking at if you haven't, is that how can the public sector, could be local council, could be a housing association, in terms of regeneration or housing, how can you use procurement to create jobs, to improve regeneration in your area? For example, when I was Transport Minister, we had what's called a community or social benefit clause in the contract for local road schemes, like the Porth Relief for a Load scheme in the Rhondda. And in there was a clause that the contractors had to take on 30 unemployed or long-term unemployed people, which they did. They provided for training and employment. So again, Procurement can be used imaginatively to create opportunities for job and wealth creation. Also, in Welsh Government Policy Manifesto, it says, improving the supply of suitably qualified procurement professionals in Wales. Again, one of the key recommendations, I think, of the barriers report. So, if you can see today, with the launch of South Wales of the winning and tendering project, this is very much in line with Welsh Government policy. It's very much in line with the recommendations of the barriers to in procurement and barriers to opportunities in procurement. So the aims of the project, I have to declare an interest, I'm on the steering group of the project, is to develop and improve the public tendering experience for small organisations, obviously particularly companies in Wales and Ireland. So how can we open up that £4.5 billion worth of opportunity more imaginatively, open it up for local companies? So what is the winning and tendering project? And we'll hear more about it today. It's on your the handouts you've had today and the draft brochure. It is a really expert project, not particularly for me, but those professionals like Dermot, like Gary Clifford and others who are real experts in procurement. It's a strong multinational project team, Wales and Ireland, with a wide range of skills and experience, with a real understanding, a deep understanding of procurement, both in Wales, obviously, and in Ireland, but being aware that we have to work within the European Union and procurement law, and also, just as importantly, have a very deep understanding of the needs of small companies. And obviously, this is a very large project. It's been designated as of strategic importance at a European level. It's funded by the Interreg, the Wales-Ireland Interreg programme under the European Regional Development Fund. So it is a fantastic opportunity, and I can't think of a better team headed up by Dermot and his colleagues to take forward the massive opportunities provided by public procurement in Wales. So I'm now I've finished my presentation, you'll be able to hear much more about the winning and tendering project and ways, hopefully, it can help you either gain more business or, if you're from the public sector, how you can get better value through the procurement process. Thanks very much.